What's going on, guys? Jonathan Shane here, functional nutritional therapy practitioner specializing in low carb endurance and performance. Today, can you run long distances on a carnivore diet? Now, the reason I'm bringing up carnivore is because some would say, well, even on a ketogenic diet, you're using some carbohydrates, and therefore you are using some of those carbs, and so your ability to not necessarily run competitively, which we'll get into that nonsense in a second, but your ability to run is kind of fueled by those those minimal carbs. So you can go, anybody can run 4 miles with a little bit of carbs, right? So that's kind of like that argument there. So I wanted to use the carnivore diet as a reference. Now, I'm going to say this with a caveat that I do know, understand, and apply to my clients and athletes the benefit of targeted carbs for performance when it comes to race day, when it comes to peak week, when it comes to overall nutrition and training, recovery, hormone balance, etc. Carbs do have their place. I will argue that all day. If you don't agree with me and you're on a strict ketogenic carnivore diet and you're not a long distance runner and you eat no carbs whatsoever, well, just back off because you don't know what you're talking about. You're not in this field, right? This is a very different world. And so understanding it from a nuanced perspective is extremely important. So that caveat that I'm not anti-carb. I'm really not, especially when it comes to endurance and performance and women's health. But that's a whole nother topic. But that being said, can you run long distances on a carnivore diet? And the answer is yeah, of course. Now, the effort that you can put into that distance is different, right? Which we'll get into in a second. There are some nuance there, but overall, in general, 100% you can run long distances on a carnivore diet, okay? Why? Because your body uses at the base of endurance movement fatty acids, right? Zone 1, zone 2, low zone 3. You're going to be using predominantly fatty acids as a fuel source. If you're running zone 2, you're not using a lot of carbohydrates. Even as a high carb athlete, you're using more fat, especially at the beginning. Now, as you get deeper into a run, let's say that you're doing zone 2 and you're running, say, a 50 miler. Yes, towards the end, your body starts to get stressed out. You start breathing less. You're not watching your breathing. You start tapping more into aerobic just because of the time of the effort. And so you do start using more carbohydrates as the race goes on, especially as a high carb athlete. But all athletes, doesn't matter your diet, you're using fat a lot in those zone 2 efforts at the beginning of long endurance races, okay? So because of that, a carnivore, ketogenic carnivore diet can be extremely complementary to your training and to your race. Being able to use fats as a base efficiently can help increase your aerobic threshold, right? Which is where you start to tip more into anaerobic energy systems, which just basically means without oxygen. It increases lactate threshold because of gluconeogenesis and some of that, the byproduct recycling, which is a whole other topic I can get into. If you want to hear more about it, let me know in the comments. But because of all those things, because of all these biological and physiological mechanisms, we see a benefit from being what we call fat adapted, okay? And so can you run 50 miles? Can you run 100 miles on a carnivore diet? Yes, I know people that have done it fasted, right? They've done no food at all. Now, can you do it competitively? Can you get first place on no carbs whatsoever? Very unlikely because most people that are winning races, even longer distances, are doing low zone 3, higher zone 3 effort during a good portion of that race. And even though fat adapted athletes use less carbohydrates, there comes a time where they are needed if you want to be competitive. So that's really the answer there. Also, training load matters, right? Like if you're monitoring your training well, you're giving yourself plenty of rest time to replenish glycogen stores, you're not overstressing yourself with strength training and other things, then yeah, absolutely. You can run forever, theoretically, on a carnivore diet, right? Again, it becomes more nuanced when we get into the conversation of, well, if you're trying to race competitively, then you need to train competitively. And so you have to train a little bit more. You have to put a little bit more miles on your belt. You need your strength training needs to be a little bit more intense, a little bit more complementary to the running structure. And that's when we get the argument of like, okay, well, maybe timed carbs around your workouts are going to help with replenishment of glycogen. So your body's not as rampant with cortisol. Therefore, your body's able to recover faster and tap back into fat burning easier the next training load. And then also during the race, just keeping glycogen stores at base so your body doesn't putter out. Your body can be happy, it can be functional, etc., etc. So again, that's where that nuance comes in. So to answer the question, can you run long distances on a carnivore diet? Yes, absolutely. Can you be competitive on a strict carnivore diet with no carbs whatsoever? No, probably not. Now, there's a story of a girl, I can't remember her name right now. I should have had this pulled up, but I don't. And she qualified for Boston on a carnivore diet, which is just amazing. Something to point out. She had trained really hard to build a big base. She was running that, which was just, let me tell you something. Like, qualifying for Boston is impressive on its own. Doing it with no carbs at all is uncanny. It's uncanny because that means that she built her zone 2 and aerobic threshold to a point where they could handle those paces. So basically a Boston qualified pace for her was not a relatively high effort for her. Whereas for most people, even on a low carb ketogenic diet, it is a higher effort. It's a low zone 2, low zone 3, high zone 3 effort, which requires 20 to 30 grams of carbs an hour, which is minimal compared to a high carb athlete. So again, there are people that have ran competitive times with a zero carb diet, but it's far and few between, and it takes a really long time, and there's just a lot of nuance there. And so again, just going back to answering that question, can you run on a carnivore diet, fasted, zero carbs? Yes, you can go a while, and I've helped people do that. I've trained, I have clients that are like, hey, I want to do it exactly your way, teaching me how to become fat adapted in time carbs. I have other clients like, I want to do this no carbs whatsoever. We have to take a slightly different approach, but it does happen. You are capable of it. But if you want to be competitive, you have to start opening up your mind to the broader picture. Okay. So I hope that helps. I hope it gives you some answers. If you are wanting a coach, if you're wanting some direction, I have free consultations in the comment section. Click that link, schedule a call with me. I'd love to hear more about you, hear your story, hear your goals, help you reach that most dialed in version of yourself so that you can perform at your best. I appreciate you. See y'all in the next one.